Polvoraria had incorporated Leon into the Kingdom of Asturias, finally making the leap to the other side of the Cantabrian mountain range. The Emir of Cordoba saw how the Asturians were gradually gaining ground through colonization. He could not allow it. Year 878. The monarch of the Kingdom of Asturias is Alfonso, the third son of Ordoño III, and he controlled the most territories that a Christian monarch had controlled since the beginning of the Reconquista. To the south was the Emirate of Cordoba, led by Muhammad. And for now, that's the context we need for today's chapter. Alfonso III is the main character in the existing county of Castile. And it's because Muhammad had designed an unprecedented invasion against the Kingdom of Asturias. Do you remember that the emirs used to launch 2 simultaneous attacks? Well, Muhammad will launch 3, in a kind of trident. The main Saracen army was led by Al-Mundir, his son, and his mission was to strike the lands in the Ebro Valley, and from there march west to Leon and Astorga. The central arm of the Moorish offensive would be responsible for ascending to the north, and its only mission was to converge with Al-Mundir's army in Leon to support his siege. And why not go directly with them in that enveloping movement? Well, because spring had just begun, and these men had to harvest the crops before they went bad. The western arm was led by Malik, and his goal was to plunder all the territory from the border to Coimbra, take the city, and then march east towards Leon to meet up with the other 2 armies. With everything ready, the starting gun was fired, and the armies of the flanks marched to their respective destinations. Malik threw himself into the Ebro Valley and began to set fire to all the crops that they could not take with them, as well as to slaughter all the livestock they came across. From the west, the invasion was going perfectly. All the fields were also being looted and the villages reduced to ashes, always marching north, always with the goal of conquering Coimbra. At this moment, the central body of the offensive was set in motion. Let's now go to the court of Alfonso III and put ourselves in his shoes. The Muslims are attacking us with 3 different armies from 3 different directions. What do? We cannot divide our army, as we would be crushed by each enemy body. So we must concentrate our forces and finish off the invaders one by one. The attack from the west didn't matter much because Alfonso III was sure that Count Hermenegildo could defend Coimbra long enough, so that left the armies from the east and the center. What he was certain of was that he had to defeat them before they converged on Leon, or the city would surely fall. He finally decided to attack the central army. Why? Because it was less numerous and no attack would be expected, as they had not yet had time to attack the Christians. It was decided. Without wasting time and at the head of his men, he set off south towards the confluence of the Orbigo and Esla rivers. The battle map is what you see on screen. This is the Esla River, the most voluminous of the 3. This one here is the Orbigo River, and this last one is the Terra. Between the 2 tributaries there is a large forest with tall vegetation, ideal for hiding an army. Do you see the road? This crosses the Esla River by this bridge, and later crosses the Lorvigo by this other one. Do you already have an idea of where the battle is going to take place? Alfonso III hid his troops in the forest, crouched attentive to the attack signal to pounce on an enemy column that did not expect resistance, and also had no scout guide, so it would be oblivious to the lurking threat. The Muslim troops then entered the scene, walking down the road. They had a contingent of light cavalry at the head and another at the rear, thus protecting the ends of the column, which was mainly composed of infantry. The baggage train also went in the rear, escorted by infantry and cavalry. The Moorish column began to cross the first bridge. Alfonso III prepared a contingent of shock troops on each flank of his army. Their mission was simple: charge against the bridges and take control of them. If they managed to accomplish their mission, they would prevent the Umayyads from escaping the battle. The Moorish column kept marching, and then the moment came. The Asturians let out their battle cry and the flanks charged. First, the Ends attacked to take full advantage of the surprise effect. They hurled javelins at the enemy, drew their weapons, and engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Of course, the Muslims on the bridges, not expecting this attack, were devastated. Then, before the central body could come to the aid of the Ends, the Asturian bulk attacked. The advantage was on the Asturian side, as the Muslim numbers didn't matter, as they had been divided into 3 sections. The Christian pawns charged at the Saracens and soon became embroiled in a bloody fight. The bridge troops formed 2 shield walls each, one looking at the bridge itself and the other looking inward, towards the central body of the Muslim army. The Cordoban general, realizing what was happening, ordered the vanguard and the rear guard to charge across the bridge. But then Alfonso III ordered the Asturian archers, who had been hiding in the forest, to come out and shoot down all the infidels trying to cross the bridge. So they did. The Moorish charges got stuck fighting against the Asturian shield walls, and those on the bridge itself were defenseless and huddled together, so the archers could decimate them at will. Meanwhile, the main battle was tilting in favor of Christianity. The Saracen troops were slowly retreating. Probably oblivious to what was happening on the bridges, they held out hope that at any moment the rest of the column would come to their aid and crush the Christians. But that was not going to happen. The Muslim general, noticing the huge losses they were suffering in trying to take the bridges to rescue the main body, and seeing that they were not achieving anything, gave a very hard order: retreat. The vanguard and the rear guard of the column turned around and retreated, leaving behind the baggage train and, most importantly, abandoning the bulk of the army to its fate. Alfonso III ordered that half of the bridge troops support the fight, while he maintained the shield walls that protected the crossings, in case the Muslims tried again to save their companions. And the Saracens kept retreating, but there came a point where they could no longer retreat as the Esla River was behind them. They were cornered, trapped. Alfonso III probably sent his cavalry to the other side of the river using the bridge he had captured. The Umayyads began to be pushed into the river, weighed down by their weapons and armor. Many of those who fell into its waters never saw the sun again. Others, aware that the battle was lost, they stripped off their armor as best they could and tried to swim to the other shore. As the Saracen troops fighting decreased in number, the Christians gained ground more quickly. And everything I just told you accelerated. More Muslims drowned in the river, more tried to swim across, and of course just as many died from Christian weapons. When those who swam reached the other shore, they noticed with real dread that freedom did not await them upon emerging, but the steels of the Asturian cavalry. This began a hunt against the Umayyads who were trying to escape. Shortly after, the last of the Muslims who were fighting was executed and the battle came to an end. The Christian Chronicle tells that in that battle 13,000 infidels died. However, take this figure with caution, as there were probably fewer, as it was common to inflate the numbers of enemies killed. However, the victory was overwhelming and the number of enemies killed was very large. Let's go to the campaign map. The central army has been destroyed, so only 2 remain. The one from the west, about which nothing is known, and the one from the east that is already on its way to Leon. Alfonso III set off and led his men to his glancia, probably in the current Villa Sabariego. There he camped, and shortly after the Muslims arrived. This was a hard blow for the Umayyads, as they expected to meet allied troops, and instead they ran into the real Asturian army. That night the Muslims led by Almundir decided to retreat, but Alfonso could not allow it. If he wanted to guarantee a prolonged period of peace, he had to eliminate all possible enemies so that they would not fight the following year. Taking shortcuts, he managed to ambush the Muslims in Valdemora, and Al-Mundir barely escaped, leaving behind a large number of Saracen corpses. 2 pieces of the offensive had been neutralized. What happened to the third? Well, it wore out over several days, attacking the walls of Coimbra, which, defended by Hermenegildo and his Galician knights, resisted each of the enemy attacks. In fact, they probably inflicted numerous casualties. General Malik ordered the retreat and their return to Cordoba. Muhammad couldn't believe his eyes. The largest organized invasion to date against the Kingdom of Asturias had turned into one of the Emirates' biggest failures. And do you know what he did? For the first time in history, the Emir of Cordoba swallowed his pride and requested a truce from Oviedo. A truce to the Kingdom of Asturias. Think about this. 150 years after a handful of, I quote literally from the Muslim chronicles, wild donkeys defeated the troops that were going to quell the revolt, the Kingdom of Asturias had brought the emirate to its knees. By the way, if you want to see the Battle of Covadonga, I'll leave the link up here for you. As conditions of the truce, which would last for 3 years, Alfonso III requested 100,000 gold denarii. A very high figure for Cordoba, but astronomical for the Kingdom of Asturias, which didn't even mint coins yet. Imagine what Alfonso III could do with all that money. But we'll leave that for another chapter. Greetings and strength and honor.